do have a good representation of the debate today. Okay. Now, every once in a while, you actually run into an honest evolutionist, so we'll see how that goes over here. But he's saying here's Werner von Braun, first director of NASA, and he's saying while the admission of a design for the universe ultimately raises the question of a designer, why would you come to that conclusion? Because as a scientist, you look for cause and effect. The scientific method does not allow us to exclude data, which lead to the conclusion that the universe, life, and man are based upon design. To be forced to believe only one conclusion, that everything in the universe happened by chance, would violate the very objectivity of science itself. I love that kind of talk. Just being logical, and he's saying you shouldn't be forced. Why? Because you should go where the evidence goes, right? He's saying just the opposite. I like the fact that they both use the word forced, right? Now he's answering the California State Board of Education. He's just basically telling you, I'm just speaking on behalf of the evolutionary community. Our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense, well, that's the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science, so-called, and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of its patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated, just so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. Does that sound like science to you?
No.
No, it sounds like a worldview that will not bend to the evidence, right? So that's all we're talking about here. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept the material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation, a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute. Oh, we're going to get to something scientific here, right? For we cannot allow a divine foot. Oh, that's not scientific. We cannot allow a divine foot in the door. He already has any objection to evidence that shows the supernatural. If you can not explain the natural world by naturalism, we simply sift out the evidence. And we exclude that evidence that removes the divine foot in the door. However, that divine foot in the door is still there. Even though you can say, I don't believe in gravity, all the way down, as you leap out of the plane without your parachute. You're denying it doesn't make it untrue. No, and here's what we're talking about here. We're talking about complexity of the universe again. Just a little bit like the size of the electron, proton, neutron. They can put these into computers now and model them. And what happens is,
Oh yeah, I know.
You turn the dial this way or that way.
You know that inside now.
No more universe.
What do you think about that?
About this?
Yeah, about the fine tuning.
Is there a way randomness could explain that?
I don't know where these numbers come from. And I know that if there were just slight changes that, life as we know it wouldn't be here today. I don't know if the universe would have, gone some other way, but...
See, well, they can test that. Mm-hmm. If it went another way, click. They actually make the dial with 10 to the 120th power zeros on it, so they go click either way, it's gone. Yeah. And these are just representative more than 120. There's just a few we put on here. So the whole point of it is this. There's so much science that makes sense of this verse right here. It says, the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead or God nature, so that they are without excuse. That's the only verse in the whole Bible I know that ends this way, without excuse, because of you don't follow these religious traditions. No, because you're not looking at the evidence in the world, what he's put right in front of you, so that you can draw the conclusion God has not been absent, he has not been silent. So he puts this evidence in front of you, and then he makes himself the only one who can match the intellect of created things by giving you the intellect that can look into the future and declare it with such detail, it makes it mathematically impossible. So it's a match. So when you find only one match, only one individual who could fine-tune the universe, who could also fine-tune the details of prophecy, and then be the only one to fulfill it, then that at least brings you logically to the place where you realize I could think about this for a couple days, and I might be 2 days too late. You heard of somebody named Bree Payton?
No, I haven't. Repeat.
Bree Payton. I didn't know her name either until yesterday. She's a very famous person who is like a journalist, and she actually speaks on Fox News and so forth. 26 years old, died suddenly. And so we think about what we're going to do next Wednesday or whatever on our planning calendar. We don't know. So because you don't really know about tomorrow, and all you know is that you're one day closer today to eternity, because we can check the statistics, but 10 out of 10 people leave this world, right?
Yeah.
Everybody dies.
Yeah.
You know what day you're going to die?
I don't.
No, I don't either. I know this, you are going to. Okay. So when we realize that, we realize, okay, the pressure really about that is that I have a finite number of days to get this figured out. And if I don't have the ability myself to understand how this could be fine-tuned without a fine-tuner, if I don't have the ability to say, well, how could David guess right about hands and feet being pierced? Or Isaiah say very specifically, but he was wounded for our transgressions. He shall see of the travail of his soul and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Suddenly, all this becomes connected, because this person here says, when you see design, you're looking for designer. When you see a fine-tuning, you should look for a fine-tuner. When you see prophetic utterance that looks into the future, challenges everybody else to do the same, to authenticate their message with prophecy, and they can't do it. And it eliminates the opposition in such a way we go, well, now logically and intelligently, I can say God has not been silent, hasn't been absent in science, he hasn't been absent in history, and now he's calling me in a very specific way. And he says, Dominic, I stand at the door and knock. If you'll open the door, I'll make you a promise. And I'm not going to destroy my integrity on you by getting it wrong. You open the door, I'll come in. So what happens if you don't open the door? He doesn't enter. He says, he who has, here's the good news right here. He says right here, after he gives that right here, he says, he that has the Son has life. He that has not the Son of God has not life. You say, well, I got life. My heart's beating away. No, life means a relationship with him. I want to hold you up. You probably got to go.
Yeah, I got 11 missed calls. So.
Look,
Sorry.
Only 11. That's pretty good.
Sorry. I got to make this quick. Thank you for talking.
You're right.
Yeah.
You know what the good news is? It's got to be quick. If I was talking about religion, we'd be here for another 3-6 hours.
Yeah.
Our relationship is pretty simple, right? I mean, we're not going to discover every aspect of the mind of God, but we're going to see there's enough there to say this planner, this one who put his information before us that we are called without excuse, is now the one saying, now I've given you enough of the 300 plus prophecies that I fulfilled to show you that I'm a man of God. Yeah, I'm a God of integrity. I'm making you a promise. Open the door. If you don't, then it's on you. But Dominic, thank the Lord, because when you walk out of here, you got one.
Yeah.
The voice here stops, but the voice inside does not. He says, I'm still knocking.
Does that make some sense to you?
Yeah.
Dominic, thank you very much.
No, thank you guys.
Yeah, it's been a blessing. You got a calendar here, too. So, anything else? Can I give you a copy of this?
I think I'm good. I'm good at
You know it pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Don, one last thing. As an astrophysicist,
Yeah.
you get asked an even more fundamental question, and that's this. We couldn't even do science or logic, have uniformity in nature without a creator God. In other words, how can you get uniformity in the laws of nature, the laws of physics, mathematics, right? You can't get from randomness to having uniform law like action in the universe. It's not rational. Do you see what I mean? And so the God we're talking about allows us to use the laws of logic, to use the laws of science.
That's right.
It'd be absurd any other way that those would be uniform. You see what I mean? The preconditions necessary for you to do science and logic as an astrophysicist. So thank you for listening to us.
No problem.
Something you'll consider, you'll look into more. And
I've always wrestled, just thinking, I don't know,
Dominic.
either way. I don't know, but So I'm always curious about this sort of stuff. So
well, he's going to give you his contact information too, just in case you got more questions.
That's my email address right there. Any one of these things, I can reproduce that for you.
Got it.
Here's the smaller version of this. I folded it in half and made it smaller.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day.
Take care.
Happy New Year. That was awesome. That was just wonderful. Here's a person who has said he's wrestled with this. So what makes a person stay as long as he did? Very often inside of 2 minutes we have, I gotta go somewhere. But we're into a 20-minute conversation, and here's a dear individual, Dominic, now walking away as an astrophysicist, realizing there's really no logical way to explain the reality of what we see before us in creation, or really in history and prophecy, apart from Christ. We can only now pray with a confidence, really, that God continues the conversation and wrestles with him until he responds to the great, simple offer, open the door, I'll come in, and I'll never leave you or forsake you. Isn't it wonderful?
And what did you find in terms of using Romans 1 and how creation declares our great God, and how that impacted Dominic?
This is exactly what Dominic needed to hear. There's only one verse in all of Scripture, I told him, that ends with the two words, without excuse. And that is, God puts in front of him the reality of himself, even though he is invisible. It's a little bit like driving your car, and you've never been to the Toyota factory, but you see that there is a Toyota factory by what you're driving. He sees now with the fine-tuned universe, with the complexity of the DNA communication system. All of these things demand, really, the intellect that agrees with the intellect that could also write the history of prophecy before it happened.
And of course, which we didn't get on film, you went over the Bible and the declaration of God, many Bible verses, before we got into a lot of the science.
That's exactly right, which is wonderful. Just being able to move through Romans chapter 1, which gives you those verses. Paul introduces himself as a servant of God, but used to be an enemy of God. Then he says, I'm separated to the gospel of God, which he had promised before by his prophets. So then that introduced the prophecies. He introduced the genealogical record that he would come from the seed of David. That's Romans chapter 1, verse 3. Then he went on from there, verse 4 in Romans chapter 1, he said he was declared to be the Son of God with power according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection from the dead. So you realize there's only one person that had this kind of a profile, this kind of authority that could speak to the issues of eternity and where he would spend eternity. So wonderful conversation. It was very enjoyable.